Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Gimel, Daf 33 of Masechta Ksubis, friends. Daf 33 is kind of interesting to the extent that it gives two alternative reasons for how we know that it's Mammon as opposed to Makis when it comes to Edim Zomin and Chova B'Chavero. Now we had said yesterday, we learned out from Psukim, right? We said that by Edim Zomin it says Yad B'Yad, which is extra to say that it's dafka something that's given Miyad Liyad, which is money, and by Chova B'Chavero it says Ken Yunosim Bo, the Dover Sheish Bo Nesina, which is Mammon. So we learned out that it's Mammon as opposed to Makis from those places. Now we're going to see some alternative options as well. Now it says the Gemara, so we're going to start on Daf Lamed Gimel Hamid Aleph, I don't know, about 10 lines into the page or so. Reb Elazar Omer, says Reb Elazar, well, what does he say? Edim Zomin Mamon Mishamin Milkul Oloki. So how do we know that by Edim Zomin they dafka pay money as opposed to Makis, right? So if you have a situation where Reuven and Shimon, where you have two witnesses saying that Reuven owes Shimon 200 zuz, and it turns out that they're Edim Zomin, which means that basically they were lying, essentially. So we have two options. Either Vasisim Lo Kasher Zomim, either they pay Reuven 200 zuz, just like they were trying to make him pay Shimon 200 zuz, untruthfully. Or the other option is Lo Sana B'Yachal Shoker. Right, there's a law against giving false testimony, so we should give makis. So which is it? Do they pay Reuven or do they get makis? So we're saying mamonu misham milkul oloki. They pay the money, they don't get makis. Mishum dilav ben esra, because we don't warn them, and therefore since we don't warn them, so we can't give them makis. In order to be able to give lashes to a fellow, you have to have had warned them, like, brother, if you do this thing, man, we gonna whip you. And he's like, yeah, bro, I gotcha. I'm gonna do it anyways. And he does it, and we whip him. But if you don't have that first, like, hey, bro, yeah, bro, so then you can't administer makis. Rava Teda, and Rava says, I'll kind of prove it to you that we don't warn Edim Zomin, because Nisrebu Amos, when would we warn them? Nisrebu Meikara, what? Would we warn them in advance, like before they actually give the testimony? Amri Ishtalin, well, if we warn them before they even give the testimony, well then they'll just claim after the fact that, oh yeah, we had forgotten at the time that we actually gave the testimony that by giving this testimony we would get whipped. Nisrebu b'shas ma'aseh, if when they're coming to give their testimony, we then warn them, by the way, if you turn out to be Edim Zomin, you're going to be in big trouble. So Pashiv l'masaydeh, well then they would just go home and not give their testimony. So Nisrebu l'vasof, what should we warn them after they already gave their testimony? We'll warn them that, that if you do this thing, then you'll get lashes. So madahava. Whatever happened already happened. You can't warn after the fact. So therefore, from the fact that you can't give them a warning, so memele, if it's sort of impossible to warn them, so memele, if there's no warning, then there's no makis. And since there's no warning, there's no makis, so memele, they would pay money as opposed to receive makis. Maskifla Abai. Abai is not convinced by Rava's argument. V'nisibu b'soch k'dei dibur. Why don't you just warn them, like immediately after they give their testimony, right? Toch k'dei dibur is the amount of time that it takes to say hello to your rabbi, which is not a lot of time. So what we could do is, right, and if you take something back, if you take back a statement b'soch k'dei dibur within the amount of time that it takes to say hello to your rabbi, so then you could take it back, right? It's considered it's part of the same action. So Abai suggests, well, I could tell you when we could warn them, that let them give their testimony without saying anything to them. So if it was in advance, we don't have to worry about them, right? We don't have to worry about warning them in advance and then they forgetting, or warning them when they come to give their testimony and scaring them away. They already gave their testimony, and immediately after they give their testimony, we then say, by the way, if you guys are lying, you're going to be in big trouble. And then they have the option, I guess, well, I don't know if we necessarily care so much about the option, but the point is that since we're warning them, it's considered relevant. Maskifla, Ravacha B'Rav Ika, V'Nisubu Me'ikara, V'Nirmazbu Ramuze. And alternatively, says Ravacha B'Rav Ika, you can warn them in advance, like, people, if you turn out to be Edom Zom, you're going to get Makis. So you can warn them in advance. But we said, but then they might forget. Well, then just sort of like hint to them, while they're actually giving the testimony to remind them. Right? So you warn them in advance, but then when they're actually giving the testimony, you like hint to them. Maybe you hint, maybe you go like, maybe that's what you do. Maybe like the people just kind of like, the people who warn them just like sit in the place where the people sit, and they flip their wrists as if they were whipping, and they go, whoosh, 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 whoosh. Maybe they do that, and then they remember. So theoretically, we would be able to warn them. Amar Abai says, Abai lav milsi. Abai da'amri. Abai says, wait, forget it. Actually, never mind about the whole warning thing. If it enters your mind to say that Edom Zomin would technically need Hasra, Kilo masrinan bu lo katlinan. If we don't warn them, then we won't be able to kill them. Mi'ika midi te inubo kato blo asra v'inubo asra. Could it be possible that they can kill somebody else without asra, but they would need asra, right? Meaning, if we're saying that in order for us to be able to administer lashes to these Edom Zomim, we would have had to warn them in advance. But one second, how does Edom Zomim work? If these witnesses wanted to say that Reuven murdered Shimon, so what would happen? He would get the death penalty. Now, they obviously didn't warn him in advance, right? Meaning, it never even happened, right? But based on their testimony, they were going to kill Reuven based on their testimony. And so how could it be that they would be able to kill Reuven without ever having warned him? And yet we'll say, but we can't kill them back unless we first warn them that if they do this, then they're going to get killed. We need that by Edom Zomin, we do to them what they tried to do to their victim. And if they were trying to kill Reuven, so then we do to them, we try and kill them. Right? So if they were trying to kill Reuven, so then we kill them. So, and that would not require warning. So therefore, Abai says, look, the whole warning thing by Edom Zomim is irrelevant. Maskifla Rav Samarbei Rav Yirmiyah. So Rav Samarbei Rav Yirmiyah asked Akasha Elamiata. If that's the case, Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza Delo Mikasha Zom Komis Rabbi Libay Asra. So one second, Abai, if you're saying that the reason why Edom Zomim do not require Hasra is because it wouldn't be in the nature of Basis Melokasher Zomim Lasos Lo'achiv, right? That by Edom Zomim we do to them what they tried to do to the other fellow, and they didn't warn him, so therefore we don't warn them. But what about Ben Gusha Ben Chalutz that we learned about yesterday? What happens in a situation where witnesses come and say that a certain fellow is a cholol, and it turns out that they're lying? So we give them makis. Now, we're not giving them makis because of basisim lokash zom lasas lochiv, because we're not doing to them what they tried to do to the other friend. They weren't trying to give makis to the other guy. They were just trying to say that he's a cholol. And yet we give them makis because we're not going to make davka, because we're not going to do basisim lokash zom. We're not going to say, okay, you guys are cholos. We don't do that. They might not even be kohanim. So instead we give them lashes. So if when we're giving them lashes, it's not because of vasisim lo kasher zom, because we're not doing to them what they tried to do to this fellow, so then they should require makis. To which the Gemara says, yeah, but the pasuk says mishpat echad yelochem, that everybody gets the same halachas, and therefore, since in most cases of edim zomim, you do not require hasra, so even in the situation of when we give makas to edim zomim because of the situation of ben gerusha ben chalutza, so we would not require hasra there either. So it's interesting. It seemed like we tried to sort of bring a different proof for how we learn out mammon as opposed to makas, from the fact that they don't get hasra. Yeah, it's interesting. So that was Rebbe Elazar's opinion. Okay, because you don't give them hasra, so therefore we wouldn't give them makas. But then we had a machlokes between Abai and Rava about can you technically, Rava says that technically speaking you won't be able to give them asra, whereas Abai says the reason that you don't give asra is because of it wouldn't be in the nature of asisim l'kasher zom lasos lachim. But maybe Rebbe Elazar still nonetheless stands that since you're not going to give them a warning, so therefore we would prefer mammon over makas. Interesting. Okay. Rav Shisha Beider Vidi Omar. So it says of Shisha Beider Vidi, Chova b'chaveru nami mamon mishalim umilka lo laki meocha. So now if Shisha Beider Vidi gives an alternate source for how we know that Chova b'chaveru is mammon as opposed to malchus, right? A fellow physically damages his friend, so we don't give him malchus, rather he pays. So he learns out from here that if you have these fellows and they're fighting, and it says that Reuven was planning to hit Shimon, but he ends up hitting Sarah, and Sarah miscarries. So it says that if Sarah dies, so then it says nefesh tachas nefesh. We're going to see later on, does that mean nefashis, or maybe it means money? But the assumption for now is that it means nefashis, right? So the assumption for now is that Reuven was hitting Shimon. He ended up hitting Sarah. Sarah miscarries. Now, if Sarah herself dies, then Reuven would be chayav misa. But if she doesn't die, so then he pays the value of the vladis. Rebbe Elazar says Rebbe Elazar b'mitzvah sheb'misa hakosav medaber. It says Rebbe Elazar that's talking about where Reuven would be chayav misa. Right, that he intended to kill Shimon, and so in the event that he would kill Sarah, he would be chayav misa. The pasuk says also that if Sarah will die, b'nosat nefesh tachas nefesh, so then Reuven will have to pay for his life with his life. Hechidami, now how could it be that Reuven would be chayav misa? Idlo asu be'amay miktil. If they didn't warn him and said, hey, Reuven, if you kill Shimon, or in this case end up killing Sarah, we're going to kill you. And he says, yeah, bro. And he does it anyways. But if they didn't warn him, so then how could we kill him? How could we entertain the fact that we're going to kill Reuven? It must be that they warned Reuven. And that's why if Sarah dies, so then he would be chayav misa. The Gemara is assuming right now that if you're warned for something more stringent, and we're also assuming right now that misa is more stringent than makis, right? That the death penalty is more stringent than lashes. So if you're warned, if Reuven is warned, like, hey brother, if you kill Shimon, you're going to be chayav misa. Well, then memele, that warning also would trickle down to the extent that if there was a chiyuv malchus, then that same warning would be able to work to administer malchus to him, right? So if they warned Reuven and they said, brother, if you kill Shimon, you're going to be chayav misa, and let's say Shimon doesn't die, and we want to know, well, can we give malchus? Was there a warning? Yes. If there was a warning for misa, then memele there was warning for malchus oichin. And the Torah nonetheless says, V'lo yeh oson onesh yonesh. And nonetheless, the Torah says that if she doesn't die, he pays money. So we see a situation where, if she does die, so then Reuven is chayav Misa, which means that in order for Reuven to be Chayiv Misa, he had to have been warned first to say that if you kill Shimon, right, or in this case end up killing Sarah, you're going to be Chayiv Misa. So it's talking about a situation where Reuven was warned, and we're saying that in the event that that this woman, that Sarah, does not die, so then what? So, well, he's already warned that if he would kill either Shimon or Sarah, so then he'd be Chayiv Misa. So he was already warned about the Chayiv Misa. Now, in the event that she does not die, so then technically speaking, since he's already warned for Misa, he's already warned for Malchus as well. And therefore, theoretically, we should be able to give him Malchus, but it doesn't say that. Right, he pays V'nosum B'flilim, right, he pays the value of the lost pregnancy. But Machman v'lo also an onush, right? It says Idavka right, he pays money. So we see that in a situation where there's two options, right, Misa or Makis, right, for hitting somebody. If she doesn't die, there's two options. Either we could, right, either he's Chayiv Mammon or Chayiv Makis, and he's already warned anyways, and yet we say Mammon and not Makis. So we see that by Chova B'Chavero, it's Dafka Mammon rather than Maskif. Friends, I'm shtickle fading, man. I mean, I'm a little bit tired. I just got off an airplane. I was flying for like 2 days. I'm like pretty tired, but I'm going to push through this daf and pass the heck out. How do we know that if you're warned for something more stringent, memele it trickles down, and then you're memele warned for something more lenient? That if you're warned that you'll be chayiv misa, memele you're warned that you'll be chayiv malchus, even though it wasn't explicit about the malchus. Dumalo have it. Maybe being warned for misa doesn't necessarily mean that you're warned for malchus. Imtim tzulom have, and even if you want to say that being warned for something more stringent, memele trickles down to oichid being warned for something more lenient. Mimai de misa chamura. How do you know that the death penalty is more stringent than lashes? Dilma malchus chamur. Maybe lashes is actually more stringent than the death penalty. Dama Rav, because Rav says ilmule nagdu lechanani mishav Azariah, that if they would have given, that if Nebuchadnezzar would have given lashes to Chanani Mishav Azariah, Palchul and Tzalma, they would have worshipped the Tzilim. They would have worshipped the Getchke. So we see that they were willing to go into a fiery furnace, sure, but right, rather than bow down to the Getchke. But if the Rab says that if they would have instead administered lashes to Chanani Mishav Azariah, they wouldn't have been able to sort of hold their position, and they would have bound down, they would have worshipped the Getchke. So we see that Makis is actually more stringent than Misa. Amar le Rav Sama Breid Rav Asi le Rav Ashi V'amilo Rav Sama Breid Rav Ashi le Rav Ashi V'lo shani loch ben hakoya sheyesh bo kizbo l'hakoya she'ein lo kizbo. 1 second, don't you distinguish between lashes that has no end in sight versus lashes that has an end, right? Jewish lashes, they first evaluate how much you can handle, and they don't give you more than that, right? And Sachakol, there's never going to be more than 39 anyways. Whereas these lashes from Nebuchadnezzar could have never ended. And that's what makes them particularly severe. But that doesn't necessarily mean that in general, lashes could be considered more stringent than death, since we know how many lashes they're going to be, and ultimately you're going to remain alive afterwards. Maskeflo of Yaakov min Arpokid. Now, Yaakov min Arpokid asked the kasha, Nichalu Abonyon. This is all fine and good according to the rabbis, right? Meaning, right, according to the rabbis, if Reuven intended to hit Shimon and kill Shimon, and instead he kills Sarah, so then if she dies, so then he'd be chayiv misa. And therefore, it's talking about, in order for him to be chayiv misa, so then, right, meaning, right, he intended to kill Shimon, but instead he killed Sarah, he'd be chayiv misa. So then if he dies, so then we'd kill, right, if she dies, or Shimon dies, then we'd kill, well, no, in this case, Davka, if she dies, so then we'd kill Reuven. And we're saying that because Davka warned him, and that's why we can kill him, and that warning also works for Malchus. But Okay, that works out nicely according to the rabbis. Dami nefesh mamish, which means right nefesh tachas nefesh, right? That if he kills Saris, then we kill him. So fine. So that means that we kill him. The Rebbe Damar Mamin, Michael Amemar. What about according to Rebbe, who says that if she ends up dying, right? If Reuven intended to hit Shimon and kill Shimon, but he ended up killing Sarah, actually only pays money to the family. So in that case, there's no warning, because we're not talking about killing Reuven or anything. We're just talking about a financial payment, so it may not have been warning. But if there was warning, and it was between money and makis, maybe we would give makis. So Elo Amar of Yaakov bin Arpakud, rather says of Yaakov bin Arpakud, Mishmei Dirava Mehacha, rather we learn out from here that by Chova B'Chaveru it's Davka Mammon and not makis. Im Yakum V'Salich Bachutz Al Meshanta V'Nika Makir, that it says that if Reuven damages Shimon and Shimon's in the hospital, so if Shimon gets better and he's able to walk around outside and he feels better, V'Nika Amaka, so then Reuven is off the hook for having hit Shimon. So now 1 second. Why does the pasuk need to say that if Shimon gets better and he's able to walk around outside, V'Nika Amake, so then Reuven is off the hook? Would we have thought otherwise? Again, did it ever enter your mind that Shimon's walking around in the marketplace and we're going to kill Reuven? And also, rather it teaches that we put him in jail. We put Reuven in jail, and then if Shimon ends up dying, so we kill Reuven, and if Shimon does not die, Shivtu Yitin V'Rapo Yirape, so then Reuven has to pay Sheves and Ripoy. Hechidami. Now how is this? Idilo Asube Amai Miktil. So if they didn't warn Reuven when he hit Shimon, right? It says that Reuven hit Shimon. Shimon was in the hospital for a while. If Shimon then we put Reuven in jail during that time. If Shimon ends up dying, so then we kill Reuven. So if we're going to kill Reuven, so then Mele Elapshita de Asube must be that they warned him, and that's why we can kill Reuven if Shimon ends up dying. And if he's warned for something more stringent, which we're assuming right now is death, so then he's also warned for something more lenient. But Rachmano, and the Torah says, Shifto Yitin V'Rapo Yirape, that if Shimon gets better and is walking around outside, so then Reuven pays him money. So we see we pay money, we don't give him makis. Maskiflo Ravashi has the kasha, reminded Musul Davar Chom, Rav Musul Davar Kal. How do we know that if you warned for something more stringent, then Mamela, it means that you warned for something more lenient? Dumalo Have, maybe it's not, maybe the warning doesn't apply to the more lenient stuff. And even if you want to say that there is a trickle-down effect for warnings, how do we know that death is considered more stringent than lashes? Maybe lashes are more stringent than death. The Amar Rav, because of course Rav said that if they would have forced that if they would have given makis to Chananim Shova Azaya Palchul Tzalma, they would have bowed down to the Getchke. If someone bid Rav Ashi, Rav Ashi, if someone bid Rav Ashi, Rav Ashi, but yeah, it's different when there's a hakoya that has an end versus a hakoya that doesn't have an end, like we explained earlier, right? But in Nebuchadnezzar, they were just going to keep whacking them, so they may have just caved and bowed down to the Getchke. But by our makis, there's a fixed amount, and therefore it's not as stringent as death. Maskeflo Rav Mari, we might have been mazed v'nika miklo aduma b'shogeg v'nika migalus kasha. And then Rav Mari asked the kasha, how do we know that it's talking about where Reuven intentionally hit Shimon, and therefore if Shimon dies, then we'll kill Reuven? Aduma b'shogeg v'nika migalus. Maybe, and so if Shimon dies, then we kill Reuven. But if right, Vinika Miktala, that if Shimon is right heals, so then Reuven is not chayv misa. Dilma b'shogeg Vinika Migalus kasha. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's talking about where Reuven hit Shimon by accident, and then if Shimon gets out of the hospital and he's feeling fine, so then Reuven is off the hook. He just has to pay for like the hospital bills and stuff like that, but he's not going to be chayv. He's not going to be chayv to go to an ear miklat, right? He's going to be parted from having to go to an ear miklat. Ear miklat, of course, is a place where somebody who kills somebody by accident goes. Friends, I'm exhausted, so I'm going to run. That was Daf Lamed Gimel, Daf 33 on Masechet Ksubis. Peace out.